In Module 4 of the course, we turn our attention to monopoly, and monopoly is going to be the first of several imperfectly competitive market structures we're going to examine. And the key feature of an imperfectly competitive market is that the firms in those markets are going to face downward sloping demand curves. So they're going to be able to drop their price and gain some business, raise their prices without losing all of their business. This makes the firm's problems different than the perfectly competitive firm problems that we've been looking at so far. So let me give you some orientation about the range of market structures that we're going to talk about. So if we could think of the spectrum of market structure, and way over here on the most competitive, we would have the perfectly competitive case. And it's so competitive, we had to imagine the features of the market and things that wouldn't really exist hardly anywhere in the world. So things like homogeneous products. That's ridiculous, right? But what markets do we know where products are all exactly the same, even though they come from different producers? There's some markets that may become somewhat close to that, agricultural markets, in particular markets for financial instruments, stuff like that. But really that's an imaginary case just so we can document what things look like when there's the most competition we could possibly imagine. But it is imaginary. Pretty competitive, but not quite the most, is that sector we will call the monopolistically, or that market structure we will call monopolistic competition. And this is a little bit like an oxymoron, like jumbo shrimp, monopolistic competition. We call it monopolistic competition because on the one hand, each firm has monopoly power over one particular variety, but we call it competition because it's really, really a competitive case. And that's because there's no barrier to entry, and in a monopolistically competitive sector, there's just tons of different varieties. So even though I might be the only producer of Phil's fantastic T-shirts, I've got to compete with Jockey and Hanes and Fruit of the Loom, and I notice Adidas and Under Armour and all these other firms are now making just T-shirt type things for under your dress shirt. Anyway, there are so many close substitutes that I have very little leeway to charge my customers high prices without losing pretty much all my business. My mother still would buy Phil's T-shirts, but that would be at a price of $75 a T-shirt, say. All right, so monopolistic competition is way over there on the pretty competitive side. We're going to talk about the market structure oligopoly in Module 5, actually. And oligopoly is, you can be a pretty uncompetitive case, can be actually somewhat competitive. It depends on some of the circumstances in the market and in ways that we'll discuss a bit. And then finally, way over here on the least competition imaginable is monopoly. And here there's only one firm faces the market. There's no close substitutes. This is just, there's not many markets we can think of that are like this, but it's this almost imaginary case where we've eliminated any source of competition that we can think of, and we just want to see what things look like when there's no competition at all. And really, everything interesting falls in this middle of the spectrum where, and indeed there's a lot of market structures where we can discuss, are they oligopolistic, are they monopolistically competitive? We can go back and forth. Autos is like that, right? There's 8 or 10 producers, and in some ways they compete fairly vigorously, but in other ways they have quite a bit of monopoly power and are protected from, or quite a bit of market power and protected from entry just because of the huge scale of production you would need to become a player in the auto industry. All right, well, let's give you a quick overview. In the monopolistically competitive sectors, products are differentiated, but there's free entry. So over time, we have zero profit equilibria. If firms are making profits in a monopolistically competitive industry, let's say Levi's is making jeans and making a lot of money, well, there's going to be Guess jeans and Lee jeans and Carhartt's jeans and Walmart's different generic brand jeans, and there's just a lot of entry of different varieties. They aren't Levi's; they can't put that tag on their pocket, but they're going to cut into Levi's business and leave Levi's just fairly little room to charge high prices and earn profits. So this free entry over time drives profits to zero. Likewise, if let's say there's just too many beer producers, it's hard to imagine, but we were in that situation in the early 90s, just shortly after the boom in craft brews. Portland in particular just became glutted with these producers of very good beers, but there just were so many varieties and so many different companies that there was a big shakeout. So Northwestern and Pyramid, a lot of brands, they still survive, but they were absorbed by Portland Brewing Company. If producers in a monopolistically competitive sector are losing money, well, there's going to be exit over time, and that exit will continue until the survivors make zero profit. So in that way, it's very, very similar to our study of competitive industry. But the reason why we can't lump them all together and do a supply and demand curve with any degree of precision to talk about, say, Mirror Pond Pale Ale, or looking at this picture Sonic, is that Sonic burgers and sodas, etc., Sonic fast food products are different than McDonald's and Wendy's and Burger King and Hardee's and you name it. So there's variety. Subway, there's variety there, and each firm, Sonic is the only one that can put that logo out and have whatever it is they have about their burgers and fries and soda and everything else. I'll be quicker in my discussion of oligopoly and monopoly because we're going to beat monopoly to death shortly during this module, and then we'll beat oligopoly to death in the next module. So in oligopoly, there can be differentiated products, but the key here is there are barriers to entry. There were none in perfect competition. There were none in monopolistic competition. In oligopoly, there's some barrier to entry, and the key to oligopoly is that there's just a few firms, and they make their decisions and they take their actions, their decisions on price and output, but even on the nature of their products, the quality. In my example here where I've got cell phone service providers, the structure of their plans, they offer these products with a great deal of awareness of what each other is doing, and we'll do a case study on this industry. It's fascinating what even one player, T-Mobile, can bring about in this essentially four-firm marketplace in the United States. And then finally, we have our monopolistic sector, or our monopoly market structure, I guess is a better way to say that. And here there's just one firm. There's barriers to entry for anybody else. There is no competition. There's no close substitutes. I've got Intel's picture here because Intel has monopoly power in the chips inside of personal computers. There's a little teeny company, AMD, that's just barely surviving, but Intel has that 98 or 99% market share, something huge. And so if you're one seller, no close substitutes, you have the ability to, say, raise price and not worry about losing all that much of your business. I mean, obviously, Intel can't charge $1 billion a chip as much as it would want to, because then there'd be nobody, right? People will go back to using typewriters. So there's market demand puts a limit on how much Intel can raise price, but that's that limit on the ability to raise prices. It comes from the demand curve and what people are willing to pay, not from other firms swooping in and taking their business.
Made with Doodlecast Pro.